Okay, so what I did was I rounded the corners of the peninsula here, and to do that I selected my extrusion and edited the boundary, and it's a little easier to do in plan view. So then I used this fillet arc button right here, and I said I want the radius of my arc to be 3 inches, and I just filleted those two corners just like you would in AutoCAD. Now if I want to set a parameter so I can change the radius, I could either go into annotate and do a radial dimension, or I could select it, and if you remember, this little icon turns a temporary into a permanent dimension. And I could do the same thing here. Hit that little icon to turn that into a permanent dimension. And I can select those two things, and I created a parameter that was called corner radius in plan. I've already done that, so it's there to be used. And when I finish my sketch, whether I change the depth of the peninsula to maybe 4 feet and the length of the peninsula to maybe 7 feet, the arcs go with it. And instead, if I say let's flex the arc radius, so the corner radius in plan, if I change that to 9 inches, then those corners get radius larger. So now the next thing I did, go ahead and save this, is I did my extra credit bullnose edge. And I said, okay, this edge is going to be up against the stove. So I want to cut this edge all the way around the peninsula and back to the wall with my little virtual router machine here. So I go to Home, Void Form, Void Sweep. Now the way a void works is if I already have a solid, and then I build a void that cuts into it, it automatically says this void is going to cut that solid that's already there. If I was to build the void first and then the solid, it's not going to know to cut it, so then I have to go into the cut command and say cut that void into that solid, and then I can control what cuts what. But since I've got my extrusion, I just build the void on top of it and it'll do the cutting. So in the sweep, I can either sketch the path, which is harder, or I can pick the path, which is using edges that already exist on another object. Just like when you're picking the edges of a roof for a fascia. So I'm going to do pick path. I want to pick this edge, that other arc, and that. And notice how Revit puts this little crosshair on the first edge that I picked. So then when I finish editing my path of the sweep, now I'm ready to go back to my sweep tab and say I want to sketch the profile, and I can edit the profile here. So now I'm in sketch mode for the profile. Now I'm not going to confuse you by doing it in 3D. I'm going to go to the front elevation. It's a little bit easier to see what's going on if I'm looking at a front elevation. And so I want to basically build a triangle with a concave hypotenuse. So I say I'm going to draw a line that's an inch over here, an inch out here, escape, and an inch down here, escape. And then I did an arc with the center and end points. And the center of my arc needs to be at the intersection of those 2 points. Well, tracking level nicely finds that intersection projected down for me. And the first endpoint of the arc is snapped to that endpoint. Second endpoint of the arc is snapped to that endpoint. Escape, and that is my profile boundary. Basically, the shape of my router bit that's going to cut off the edge of the corner and make that into a bullnose. So then I just finish my profile, and then I go back to the sweep tab and I finish the sweep. So I'm completely awake from all my dreams now, if I'm Leonardo DiCaprio. And there I go. There's my nice little bullnose. I like to bump the scale of my 3D view up to a larger scale so that the lines aren't so clunky looking. And then let's try flexing that. So I could say, let's try changing the peninsula length from 5 feet to 6, and let's change the peninsula depth to 3'3", and OK. And that works. Everything falls into place. And now the acid test, let's try changing the corner radius from 3 inches to 6 inches. And even that works because I used pick path, and part of that path was that arc, which is defined by that radius. So as the arc changes, the path of the void sweep changes, and the bullnose edge follows right along with it. So then I'm going to save this puppy, and then I'm going to build a backsplash. Now the weird thing about the backsplash is it's going to go up against the wall, but when you get around on this side, we don't want our backsplash to kind of hang out over that bullnose. That would look really odd. There'd be like a corner that you could shove chewing gum into. So we want to stop the backsplash tangent to that bullnose. So for that reason, I'm going to do the backsplash as a sweep rather than an extrusion, even though theoretically I could do it as an extrusion. I think it's a little better, a little easier to say I want the path to go along here and stop just shy of that end by an inch. So let's go back to our plan. And then I want to do home. And this is going to be a solid sweep, not a void sweep like the other one. So sweep. Again, I go to sketch path. This time I'm not doing pick path, I'm doing sketch path. And so I have to rely on reference planes. Now I want to set my work plane to be the top of counter now, top. And then I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to purposefully put the line off to one side so I can make sure I've aligned and locked it. So I'm going to draw my path, then I'm going to do a line to this reference plane and that line and lock it. And then I want the south end point of that path to be at this end, at this reference plane. Align that point and lock it. Now at this end, I actually want to do something a little weird. I want to stop 1 inch shy of that end. And notice how the temporary dimensions are going to help me out this time. There's 1 inch. So then I want to lock that, so I put DI and I dimension from the reference plane to the end point, drop it down, escape, escape, and then lock it. So that stays 1 inch. So as the ends of the countertop might move, that stays 1 inch back. And that is my path. So now I have to sketch the profile, so I can edit that sketch, go to the front view. So now I'm looking at the area where I'm going to build this bullnose. I'm sorry, this backsplash. Bite my tongue. So then I'm going to go up 4 inches high, so I'll go 4 inches up. I'm going to come over, let's make it 1.5 inches again, and then back down and over. So now I actually want to put a bullnose here just to match the one at the front of the counter. So again, I'm just going to pull that back to 1/2 inch there. Whoops. Right there. And I'm going to pull this down to 3.5 inches. Actually 3 inches, sorry. So then I'm going to do my little arc, center ends arc again. I'm going to find the projection of those two and go over and up. There's my backsplash. Then I want to cove that so that I have, the water will kind of run down. So then I get a little trick here. I do another center and endpoints arc. I'm just going to float it out in space and make it a 1/2 inch radius now. Then I'm going to move that puppy over. Move it so that that is there. And then I'm going to move it up. So it's right there. And then I've got to move that line. I'll just delete it and redraw that line down where it needs to be here. So all that trouble to just draw that little shape. And I know I went kind of fast through that, but because it's extra credit, you can watch the video for this part. So now if I finish that, I'm done with the profile, and then I finish the sweep. So now I can admire, here's the sweep and there's the countertop, and let's spin it around and see if this end makes sense. And it does. So then I'm going to do a join geometry between the sweep and the rest of the countertop. So then I've got this nice smooth curve that happens at the back of the countertop. Now that looks more like a Corian countertop than granite, but anyway, that's my shape. And now let's try flexing the length against the wall and just make sure everything works. Let's go from 6 feet to 9 feet for the length against wall. There we go. And I could make another parameter inside the sketch of the profile to be a backsplash height if I really want to get carried away with it. But I think that's enough. So the only thing I still have to solve is why I can't seem to get the masking region to properly show the cabinets in the plan. So I'm going to save this. And to get full credit, you don't have to get the masking region to work, but I'm going to work on that and put another video up, and I'll let you give that a try. And if I think there's time to cover it Thursday, I'll cover it at the beginning of the class. But Thursday we're going to go into sheets and tile blocks, so we're going to reserve as much time as we can for that. So we've actually got some time left here. I'm going to go ahead and finish this recording. Windows and backsplash.